Well, good morning. Welcome to this My HR Toolkit training webinar. Today we are going to cover new starters, leavers, data retention and reporting within the system. My name is Simon Ross. I am the sales and support team leader for My HR Toolkit, and I shall be taking you through this in our series of webinars. What we're going to cover today, we're going to have a look at, of course, the settings. There isn't that much to set up in the way of new starters and leavers. As controllers, you all have access to the new employee wizard. All we're going to need to set up is the actual the leavers section and the data retention. Once we've done that, we'll go into the new starters and show you a little bit about the bulk import and also the new employee wizard. We'll take a look into leavers. We'll look at the data retention settings, and then of course we'll have a look at a few reports that help you to cover new starters, leavers, and a little bit of staff numbers. So what I'll do, let's go into the toolkit. As you can see, we're in the management section, and we'll go straight into recording or setting up how to manage this information. I should point out this, we're not going to cover recruitment or applicant tracking. We're just going to look at adding new employees to the system and marking people as leavers. So the settings, as with everything else, found within the config area in access rights, and then we want user permissions. Now in here, all you need to do is you need to search for the person that you want to give these permissions for, click the edit permissions button, and then there's two options. The first one is to set them to manage leavers. Do you want this person to manage the leavers in the system? I want to do this, so I'll click yes. Do you want them then to be able to configure the individual retention policy for employees? So this is not the global setting that I'll take you through later on. This is the individual settings for each leaver. And I'll explain a little more about the difference between the global and the individual settings later. But we'll click yes for both of these, update that. Great. Now I can manage leavers within the system. I can set the data retention settings. So let's go have a look at what we can do. So in management, we've got the new employee wizard. Okay, so we can add new employees to our system. There's two options here. So the first one I'll point out is the import employees. So if you've had a major recruitment drive or you've had a bulk amount of employees that you want to add to the toolkit, you can do that here a little bit like in the initial setup where you can add employees from the spreadsheet. You can download this spreadsheet. It has a couple of employees on there as an example. Also some text to tell you that you can delete that from there. A couple of things to point out for that spreadsheet. The first one is that the user ID column, the first column, you don't need to put anything in that column because the system will generate a user ID for each employee. The only other thing to note in these columns is that don't change any of these. So don't remove any or don't add any extras in here. If you do, the system will throw up an error. And then you've got details for adding the actual information to the toolkit. So as usual, if you're used to the setup, you have the numeric values for job titles and for people's titles. It also covers marital status, so locations and departments. And then I will just point out that, of course, as with everything else in Toolkit, the date format needs to be 2 digits for a day, month, and then 4 digits for the year. Once you're happy with your spreadsheet, and I would encourage you to add as much as possible to the spreadsheet if you have that information. It just saves you a little time in the long run. So once you're happy with that, save it as a CSV and then just choose upload, and the system will then ask you to confirm a couple of things. So the first one is that the first row are your column headers, and then it will ask you to confirm the first employee's information. And we're basically here just confirming that the name matches up with the name, the email with the email, and so on. And then it will take you through and it will add all those employees to the system. So that is the bulk import. What we'll do now is we'll take a look at the new employee wizard, and this is just for adding individual employees to the system. And there's no better way than actually just taking you straight through this. So I'm going to add basic information, the minimum amount of information you can to add an employee, just so we can take you through all of these steps. But as with the upload spreadsheet, I encourage you to add as much information as you possibly can during this setup process. Again, it just saves you a little time in the long run. So I'm going to add my employee name. We just click submit, and then we're into the next step. So we've got to add a start date for this employee. So let's take a look at, we'll look at the 1st of April as their start date. You can then tell the system if they have a leave date. So is this employee on a fixed term contract, whether it's short or long period, you can add that date in. If you do add that date, of course, the system will prorate their holiday based on their start and end date, and also the point in the holiday year that they're at. You can then also choose whether the employee has a probation period within the system. So we're going to click yes, just because I want to be able to show you the other details. So we can click choose the length of probation period, whether it's in months or weeks. We can choose who gets a reminder about these. And you can choose the employee or the employee's manager, controllers. There's an other employee option. So this gives you the ability to choose a specific employee. So maybe someone in the payroll department or somebody else that has to know about specific new starters. And then, of course, you can choose to send these notifications to an external email address, such as your outsourced payroll or HR company or anything like that. But just be aware that some information, some personal information may go out in that email, which we'll highlight a little later. And then you've got the option to have a notifications about the expiry of the probation period and choose when these are going to be sent to you. So then we're just getting a confirmation that we set up a probation period and that these are the people that are going to be notified that that period is coming to an end. Then we get into the employee's work and personal details. So again, I will add the basic information that we need to here, which is a location and department. The employee must have a job title in the system as well. They do also have to have the personal information over here. The only thing that we haven't filled in so far is the date of birth. Now, you have to have a date of birth in the system. There are no other mandatory fields in this section because we've already filled their name details in, but you can add, and I would recommend adding all of this information at this point. Of course, the home address and some of this contact information can be added on that spreadsheet if you're bulk importing people. So we're happy with the information that we've added. We just click submit, and again, we go through to the next section, which is access rights. Now, we do get asked this question quite a lot, and it's, what does the employee have access to if we say yes? So the default permission for employees in the system is the employee or the base level of access. That means that an employee will only have access to My Home, where they see their own information. The system doesn't automatically give anyone managerial or controller access, so they won't be able to see management or employee files or config. They also won't be able to see other employees' details. So we'll click yes, give access as an employee. Then we get the chance to choose whether we want them to be a controller or not. So do we want this person to be a controller? Just remember, if you select yes, then they do have access to absolutely everything in the system, all employees' information, all tabs, all areas. So for this person, I'm just going to select no. But the next step is management rights. Do we want that person to be able to see management and employee files? Well, actually, I want this person to be a manager on the system, so I'm going to select yes. Now, at this point, this doesn't mean that they will be able to see specific employees. They'll just have access to these two extra areas. In the next step, this is where we can tell the system which employees we want them to be able to see. So you can either select some individuals on the left. You can use, if they want to manage everyone, you can select all, or you can click for any of the locations that you have or specific departments. So I'm going to pick finance for this employee, and you can see that anybody who is listed in the finance department is selected. We click submit, and then we just get a confirmation of the employees we're selected to tell us that that person that we are adding here will be able to see the information for the employees listed below. Then we set the specifics of what the manager can access. So do we want them to access employee files? That's the first option. If we say no, then the employee files tab will just not be available for them. Then we're looking at some of the areas of the document library. So do we want them to access contracts for their employees, or company handbook, CVs, ID documents, anything like that? And then also, which parts of management do we want them to access? So I want this person to be able to access holiday entitlements, but not absence. We want them to be able to see the career history and reports. Now, when it comes to pay and benefit details, you have three options. The first one is full access. That means for their employees, they'll be able to see all pay records and also edit those. If we select view only, they lose the ability to edit the records, but they can view them all. If we say no pay and benefit details at all, that means that manager will not be able to see the pay and benefits tab at all. And then we want to set what their view is on the holiday calendar. So a little bit like employees, but this is in management. And we're going to say actually that for this person, they can see holidays for everyone in their department only. Then we've got another step in the access rights. So who is going to be the manager for this employee? Well, we can pick any managers that we want on the system. So I'm going to pick a couple of managers that we want to be able to view this employee's file. Of course, we can't select controllers because they can't also be managers, because they are already able to see everybody's records within the system. So we'll click submit, and we'll go through to the next stage. System email. Now, everybody has to have a system email, and the system email is the email address that the system will use to communicate with employees. So when they get their welcome email, any notifications that they need to be aware of, the system will use this. So you can either add someone's work or personal email address here. That's up to yourselves. If they use something like sales at or finance or accounts at that is used by multiple people, you can set them as a shared email address. What that means is the system won't send out specific or personal emails. It will send an email for the attention of, please log into your toolkit. It will also, it won't send a welcome email to that employee either, because that has a link for them to access their account, and this is going to a generic or a shared email address, so it won't send that out. So our next stage, the documents for the employee. So here we can add all of the personal documents for that employee. So whether it's their contract or the job description, CV, any ID documents or anything like that. For correspondence, you can choose whether they see each of those documents. And you're not limited to just one document. You can upload any number of different documents. You can only do one at a time though. And there is a limit of 15 megabytes per document. And these can't be audio or video files, but there is quite a number of different files that you can upload. And that does include Word docs, PDFs, Excel files, even saved emails, and then also JPEGs or PNGs. Now, the next step is giving them access to company documents. So in the document library, you can send out copies of any document in induction, company handbook, and other rules and procedures. So here we are I'm going to send a copy of the company induction document, the new handbook, and then an update to the other rules and procedure documents. Now remember, these documents, these are the ones that the system tracks when the employee opens, and also when they confirm they read and understood those documents as well. So we've selected which ones we want to give the employee access to. We click submit, and once the employee has received their welcome email and they log in on their message board, they'll see that those documents are available. Now the next section is appraisals. So if you use appraisals, you'll be familiar with this area. You can choose any appraisal profiles that you have. So for this person, I'm going to pick a new starter just to be easy. You can choose the manager responsible, so that picks from the appraisal profile. We can edit that. We can also send notifications to their line manager or controllers. We can pick the deadline, and you can only pick days of the week specifically, rather than being able to pick a date, because if you pick, say, like the 6th of May as it is today, at some point that will fall on a weekend, so you won't actually be able to mark that as completed, because maybe the employee won't work at the weekend, so that task will then become overdue. So we give you the options to pick days in the week, and then you can choose how far before that appraisal is due that you want the reminders to be sent out. Of course, if you don't use appraisals, you can just simply skip this step. Now, the hours status. So this is where we tell the toolkit whether someone is full-time, whether they're part-time. So if somebody only works, say, 2.5 days out of 5 and they're on a 50% part-time percentage, you can put 50% in here. And in fact, we will. And then you have the option here, if you put a part-time percentage in, do you want to apply this part-time percentage to the holiday entitlement or not? Well, I want to do that, so the system will apply that and it will prorate their holiday based on this percentage. You do also have the option to choose not to. And then you've got anyone who is 0 or variable hours. So the details that you can add here, the standard FTE working week. So if this employee was full-time, how many hours would they be working? So it's basically your full-time week, 37.5 or 40 hours, whatever your full-time week is. Then you've got their variable hours at holiday accrual percentage. So at what rate do they accrue holiday? And if you click this question mark, it will take you to our reference guide, which gives you the formula for calculating what that employee's accrual percentage is. And then you've got the full-time holiday entitlement equivalent in hours. It sounds like a bit of a mouthful, but basically what it is if this employee was working full-time, what would their holiday entitlement be in hours? For the standard 20+8, I believe it's around about 224 hours. So you'd put that in here, and you can use some of these as a cap as well. So you could use the full-time week as a cap to stop people accruing holiday on more than a full-time week. You can also cap at the level of a full-time holiday entitlement. Of course, if you don't want a cap, you can just put a much higher figure in this area. So we're happy with our part-time percentage. What we'll do, we'll just click submit. We'll go through to the next stage, which is actually setting their holiday entitlement. So you can choose the holiday year for the employee. You can say whether the holiday is going to be in days or hours. For my employee, I'm going to put them in hours because they're working part-time. And I'm going to say that their holiday entitlement is 224 hours. I will also say that their bank holidays are included in the entitlement. So what this means, it's just a flag within the toolkit to say that the bank holidays are part of your entitlement. So for people who would use their holiday entitlement to cover bank holidays, you would add that as included. But for anyone whose entitlement doesn't include bank holidays, meaning they are in addition to that and they just don't use holiday to cover those, you click not included. Once I click submit, the system will apply the part-time percentage to that holiday entitlement, and we go forward from there. Now we're going to set holiday groups. So who are these, the holiday requests for this employee going to go to? Well, firstly, you have the option to say that they are senior enough to be self-authorizing, so they won't have to request holidays, they can just book them in themselves. If they're not senior enough for that, you can choose the holiday group that they'll be part of. And you do have to be part of a holiday group in order to be able to request holidays. So I'm just going to select my all group, and these holiday managers on the right will receive the holiday request for that employee. You can, of course, create a new holiday group if you want to. So then we go through to the next stage, stage 11, which is the hours work profile. So if you use these in the toolkit, you'll be familiar with them, but these only work for people who have a set working pattern. So maybe someone who is Monday to Friday, 9 till 5:30, or works the same hours every week. If you are on a 0 hours, a variable hours contract, or you're in a rotating shift pattern, or you work split shifts, then you just can't set these profiles for the employees. So at this point, you would have to then skip this step. You can now add some basic pay details for the employees. So from their start date, how often are they paid? Annually, monthly, hourly, daily? What is their full-time pay? The system will prorate that based on the part-time percentage. You can add their payroll number, any notes, and then upload documents. Of course, this is not mandatory information for the system. So again, if you don't want to record this, you can just simply skip this step. Again, the same for benefit groups. If you use the benefit groups, you can add employees to those, any existing groups that you have. If you don't use these, basically what you can do is you can create a group. You can give it a name and any specific details, and you can add employees to the group, and it's just then a record on their file that they are receiving that benefit from the company. So I'm going to say that this person's part of the pension scheme. Click submit, and we go through to the summary. So we've almost finished the new employee wizard. This is all the information that we've set up for that employee. If we want to amend anything here, we can do. But what we've got the option at the top, I just want to point out, you'll notice that this bar across the top here in blue was originally orange. This gives you the option to save the point that you're at. So at any point you can click save. What happens is you get a confirmation that that employee's details are saved where you were. If we then go to the message board, it's only the message board for management, we can see that we haven't finished adding that employee. So we can either remove them or we can resume adding the employee. And what it'll do is it'll take you back to the last stage that you'd entered information. So yes, they had the pension scheme. We don't need to select that again because it saved it. We just click submit. We get that summary again, and I'm quite happy with the information I've added. So I click submit. Now we want to tell the system if we're going to give them access or not. Well, if you remember originally I said yes, they're going to have access. So I want to send the employee an email to get them started. We click continue. We go through to the next stage to say that this employee now has an account. You will have the option to send a notification to the following people. And this is the information that will be sent. So if you remember I said you could send out that new starter email. These are the details that get sent in that email. And we can look specifically at who gets those notifications a little later when they're found in the config section. So for me, I'm just going to click don't send, just finish. Fantastic, we have done the new employee wizard. That employee is added, they've been sent the welcome email, and they're all good. We're added to the system. So then that leaves us with leavers. So on the flip side of the new starters, you've got leavers. Here we've got some data retention settings. Now this is something that we updated within the system when GDPR came into effect 2 years ago this month, in fact. So you've got the option to set global data retention settings. And if you remember when we set the permissions for myself, we looked at the individual retention settings. So I'm going to go through these and show you what is actually available. So we go to data retention settings. You can also find these in config if you type data retention in, but the default is never process. So we don't automatically process leavers. What this means is that when you add someone as a leaver, they will remain in the leavers archive until you decide to do something with them. The first option you've got then after that is a processing of leavers. So after an employee's leave date, you can have them sit in the leavers archive for a specific amount of time. We've got set up here that's 6 months. So I've added my employee's leave date. They leave on, say, the 1st of June, and then for the next 6 months, their details will stay in the leavers archive before they are processed and then moved into the processed leavers area. And we'll take a look at the processed leavers area after we've set these settings. What you can do at that point is you can anonymize your leavers. So any of the details here, you can have anonymized or removed. And just so you're aware, if the employee's name is anonymized, so change their name to a user number, You can't change that back. You can also choose to have a delay on that. So if you said that, well, actually, I want them to be moved into the process leavers area out of the archive, but for 6 months, I don't want them to be anonymized. I want them to stay in there for a little while with their previous names, just so I can look them up. You can also choose to have any of these selected items deleted from their file. And again, as with the anonymization, that deletion is final. You can also choose to apply this to anybody who has already left. So you can then have an up-to-date process for all your leavers. This does take 7 days to come into effect for anyone who has previously left, just so that you don't click, yep, anonymize everybody who's left. You update that, and then suddenly you lose all that information that you've already previously had. So that will take 7 days. The final option is full deletion, and this is literally full deletion of that employee's record. So we can set our archive period again. So this may be actually that 6 years after somebody leaves, they are processed and their file is completely removed. Everything about them is removed. There'll be no record that they even started on your toolkit. And as it says here, this is final. Once someone's deleted, they are gone completely. And like with the last option, the process leavers, you can apply this to anyone who has already previously left. But again, this will take 7 days, just so you don't have to worry that if you select this and click update, suddenly all those previous leavers won't just be deleted. You do also get notifications about anyone who is due to be processed in the next 7 days, and we'll show you how to send that notification in the config section just in a little while. So that's our data retention. That is global settings. We're going to go back into management, into our levers section. And I mentioned that you can also set this for individuals as well, which we'll look at just now. But here we can see the date that our settings were changed. So the global settings were last changed in 2019. Currently we're set, the retention period is indefinite. So we don't process the levers in this system. And there are no levers, no users ready to be processed in the next 7 days. So the first thing we've got to do is we've got to set someone as a lever. So you can only set someone as a lever if they are on your system. So we're going to pick the employee that I've just added. We can see some basic details for them. I'm happy that this is the correct person. Now we can add their leave date. So I'm going to say that they'll finish on the 1st of July. We can pick a reason for leaving. This will be end of contract. You can pick an other option. You can add notes. You can add notes in here anyway, but there's the other option in the notes. And we can choose when we want the notifications to be sent out. However, who gets these notifications is set within the config area. This is just when those notifications are sent out. And as I mentioned, we will cover those notifications shortly. So I click set lever. The system then gives us the final holiday calculation for this employee. It's a full breakdown. Now, to point out that when you set a leave date for someone, you can no longer edit their part-time percentage or their holiday entitlement. That's purely because the system has given you this breakdown. This then wouldn't be correct if you change those details. So in order to edit those details, you would have to reinstate the employee. Now, for each employee, you have the option here to amend their leave date. So if you put the wrong date in, or somebody's now going to leave a little later, you can change that. We can view the archive page for this employee. If I just go back to the home section for leavers, we're actually going to go straight to the archive completely for for all of our employees. So we've got the archive on the right here. This is where anybody that has a leave date set up will already be added in here. You can see if they've got exit documents or if they've got custom data retention settings. So the actions section, you can amend the data retention settings for each individual here. You can amend their leave date, you can reinstate them, you can view their leaver summary again, or their entire employee file, which is basically the employee file section. And then you can upload those exit documents. Now, if you go back to the leavers home area, the final place, you've got your process leavers. So this is for anyone, if you set to process them, that have been through that processing phase. You can see here these people have been anonymized. They weren't done under custom settings, just global settings. But here we can, there's a couple of options we can do. So we can see the process history, so the date that they left, when they were processed. You can see a couple other things as well for them. And then we've also got our leavers report. So this is starting to look at the reporting now, and here basically once you pick your time frame, so which year, any locations or departments, you can basically see any leavers from there. So you'll see their start and leave date, how long they were with the company, the reason for leaving, their final holiday calculation, and of course you can export all of this straight to Excel. So let's take a look at the other reports that are available, and they are available from the reports section. So we can look at the leavers report that we just seen there. So it's available within the leavers section or from reports, as most of our reports are. But what we're going to look at, we're going to look at the staff numbers. So the first report is the starters and leavers report. So for each of these, you can pick your year and your locations and departments, so you can filter on specifics. Once you pick your time frame, you then get a list of, well, any starters in that period, any leavers in that period. Of course, you can export that to Excel. You can view this report as a rolling 12 months or a year to date as well. And then we've got both an analysis for starters and for leavers. And this basically is just numbers of starters in this report. So we can see that in June 2013, we had 11 starters. We had 5 starters the month after, and then the month after that. If we look at the leavers report, we can also see any leavers that we had. So we can see that we had 3 leavers in June 2016. And you can get an idea here for when you have quite high amounts of recruitment, or if you have high amounts of leavers at any point. So some of the other staff information, staff numbers reports, you've got a head count. And this report shows you how many active employees you have today. But this report then shows the number of active employees that you have on the last day of each of these months. So currently, on the last day of December 2020, we will have 17 active employees on myhrtoolkit. In June, we'll have 20. You can see that for any of the dates. And if we go into our staff turnover report, this is currently the only report with a graph in it. We do intend to add graphs to various other reports, but we'll take a look into the data table. And you've got various different bits of information here. So a bit of information around turnover and your percentage change, starters, your month open and close, so you can see if you've had starters or leavers. And there's also a little bit of a key just to tell you what some of that information is in the system there. And then this is not specifically to do with starters or leavers, but you have a gender ratio report is found in this area, so I'll point it out for you. And basically, any genders that you assign within the toolkit, you can report on, so you can see the balance across all of the genders here. And of course, you can export this straight to Excel. Now, I mentioned about those notifications, so let's just go back into config quickly, and we're going to access rights, and we'll look specifically at notifications. Now, there are different areas you can look at here, but we're only going to look at 3. We're going to look at new starters. So the email that was sent out for the employee when we added them to the new employee wizard, this is where we can choose who gets that email. Just remember, though, that this information does get sent out for that employee. So it does include some sensitive information there. So just beware when you're selecting people to receive that. Your leavers notification. So when we set someone as a leaver, we could choose when that leaver's email was sent. Then here, we can choose who that leaver's email gets sent to. And then the same for data processing. So if you set to process leavers or to delete leavers, you get a notification telling you in the next 7 days who those employees are that are going to be processed. And this is selecting who gets that notification. Again, you have the option to select other employees, so someone specifically in the payroll or something like that, or external email addresses such as external payroll or HR companies.